More history for the 2025 Colorado Rockies. No team has ever started a Major League Baseball season by losing 50 games before winning 10 of them. We figure out how to fix the Rockies by going against the Rockies with Connor versus Rockies and a whole lot more on today's episode.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the second day of June in the year 2025. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team somehow, some way is still the Colorado Rockies, you are in the right spot because that's what we do around here each and every day. Free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. And joining us today on the Locked On Rockies podcast, you might have caught him on Purple Row back when the Rockies were relevant and fun. Connor Farrell joins us here. You also might know the wonderful blog there, the Rockies vs. Connor blog that we were talking about actually last week on the show. So we wanted to bring him on, talk a little bit more about it. Connor, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Connor, first things first, when I hit you with the no team has ever started a Major League Baseball season by losing 50 games before 10 and a long list, of Rockies history that's been made this year, just tell me how you feel as a Rockies fan. I think, again, you have the experience covering it. You write about the Rockies. There is that element, but at its core, you are still choosing to watch and follow the Colorado Rockies. Just tell me how that feels as a fan for you.
It's tough. I think it's tougher now because I am upset with the team. Obviously, they're not built correctly, but I feel bad. I mean, watching them today, that was just a normal way to lose a baseball game. Like, you gave up 4 home runs, you coughed up runs when you didn't need them. It was just a normal way to lose, and that's the hardest part now. Is like, oh, they're just bad. Like, it's not like they're fun bad where they're when they were giving up 3 runs on 1 pass ball or anything like that. It's just watching this team that cannot get the hits they need or the pitches that they need to execute, and it's tough.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's what's hard. Is it's when you're obviously the schedule hasn't done them any favors, and I think that's important context for this year. But it shows you the big thing that I've been kind of hammering on home is it shows you how far behind this team is. It shows you how far behind the 8 ball this team is in so many ways. So like that's where, I really liked reading you have decided to take it upon yourself to really dive into some numbers on how to crack the code here. But even before we get into this, after all of your experience following and covering the Rockies and doing that, do we honestly believe that this year will lead to what should be drastic change? Normal organizations don't do what the Rockies did in the face of back-to-back 100-loss seasons, and now going through the literal one of the – we have to start striking one of the and start putting possibly the worst Major League Baseball season of all time. Do we really, truly, deep down believe that this will lead to change for the Colorado Rockies?
If anything's going to, it has to be this, but I don't know. I think firing Bud Black was kind of a moment where I realized, like, at least somebody's watching and not happy with what's going on. They could have kept Bud through the year and just been like, well, it was a tough year. There was injuries and the schedule was hard. And, they had some good fun times, but I think firing Bud was at least a signal that they weren't happy. I don't know that even if they made the changes of firing Bill Schmidt or reorganizing the baseball operations, I think you could see things like Sterling Monfort becoming general manager, or things that just not restructuring in the correct way or understanding what was wrong, and changing the mindset, just rearranging the deck chairs. So I think that it's 50-50 really. Like, do we think maybe it's the only way it could is if they had the worst season anyone has ever had in 140 years, but is it the right way? I don't trust the Rockies to do that.
And how can you trust the Rockies to really do anything at this point? I mean, again, we're told they're a draft and develop team, yet they just had to send Michael Toglia back down to the minor leagues because he's striking out more than anybody in Major League Baseball. We're supposed to expect that these guys are supposed to break out, yet when you really look at it, yes, there's exciting guys. Hey, Jordan Beck, applause and credit where credit is due. A solid season in Hunter Goodman. It's been a little hot and cold, but I think he's been put in a position where he's like, I'm trying to carry this whole thing, and in a normal team, Hunter Goodman's performance this year, you'd be pumped on for a guy that's still kind of forming and breaking out into the major league level. And I know there's still maybe some hesitations, but I'm still high on Brenton Doyle and Ezekiel Tovar. Like, there are pieces here, yet I mean, I got to admit, the thing I got the most wrong, and maybe I was too bullish, and this goes into Bill Schmidt as well, really buying into this pitching staff. I mean, I think I severely underestimated what it would take for both Germán and Antonio Senzatella to return. And I'm kind of a believer of, while Kyle Freeland isn't an ace for anybody, he's not great. It's kind of been more unlucky than most things, because it's like, if he got any sort of run support, it feels like his whole career would be different. But I thought that this pitching staff being back together, being the Rockies rotation that got them to the playoffs, basically minus John Gray, was going to be enough for this team to be different. And clearly that's not the case here. And so let's kind of get into, what do you think for these veteran pieces? I mean, what type of trade value do you expect at this point? And can the Rockies move on from any of these guys? Because you got to imagine that Germán's walking at the end of the year. I mean, there's no way he's coming back to this team. And let's be honest, and you pointed this out in your piece as well, Antonio Senzatella does not work for the Colorado Rockies. It has been proven time and time again this year, especially. I want to push back on something you said about Kyle Freeland, but I want to start with those two guys first.
Yeah, I think Germán, you kind of get a little lucky that the contract is ending, and tough to say lucky because he's a club legend. Really, he is. He's one of the best pitchers to ever wear the purple pinstripes, so that's tough. But you get a little lucky. You let him walk. Senzatella, I think it's never really been enough. And this is the way he pitches and the style of pitcher he is. And it's frustrating that the Rockies signed him to a deal that, with all that guaranteed money, knowing what kind of pitcher he was and not trying to change him at all. And maybe the injury set him back and made him default back into being the pitcher that he is. But it's never really worked for him to really be a fully developed Coors Field type pitcher. And I think that's one where you just take your loss. You can't play with it anymore. You can't sunk cost fallacy that one. You just got to say it's best for both of us if you move on. And I don't think there's any trade value with the Senzatella. You could wager with a team and say, hey, Germán is building back up from injury. He's had some flashes. He's clearly got some stuff left. Coors is a tough environment for him to do that. Would take a chance on him, but a team could also just say, I'll wait until the winter when he's had a full season. So it's tough. It's tough.
And my only thing too here also, because we're talking about these are some of the guys you were talking about, and Senza's that one's a tough one. I mean, and again, it's hard because I'm kind of one of those guys where it's like, sports commentary is so weird because it's like these guys are twice the athlete that I, four times, 5 times the athlete I am, and can throw a baseball better than I. But it's just the profile. You mentioned the Rockies should actually be exploring getting rid of Kyle Freeland. And while I see it from your money perspective, because Kyle Freeland is the second highest paid Rocky on the team outside of Chris Bryant. And let's be honest, we don't have time probably to dive into that whole can of worms there as well. I mean, do you think moving on from Kyle Freeland helps the Rockies in the long term instead of being what you mentioned in your piece? I mean, for Dick Monfort, you can't ask for a much better story of a Colorado-grown pitcher that loves being with the Rockies, that's super involved with the community. That, again, I think, you ask some Rockies fans, they might be a little iffy, but I find it very hard to believe if you've loved the Colorado Rockies, you're not at least a fan of Kyle Freeland and who he is a little bit and what he brings to the team. I'm kind of in the camp of you keep him and he kind of keeps something here together. But at the same time, if teams are interested, you can, and you need to tear this team down to the studs. Why not? I'm just curious if you're just to elaborate on your thoughts on Kyle Freeland a little bit more.
I think with Freeland, the call would be, if you tear down the front office, you say, we need a totally different mindset. We need a totally different organization, everything from that has to go. In the same way that I think Michael Toglia is a major league hitter, but I think the Rockies should never give him another at bat. Like, there are just mindsets and ideas that you have to kind of rip out and say, nope, we can't do this type of thing anymore. And Freeland kind of represents that with pitching, where they just kind of focus too much on trying to make him a Coors Field pitcher and not on just being the best type of pitcher that he is, which in 2018 was an incredible pitcher, received Cy Young votes. So, like, I think, like you said, there's so much tangible and intangible value with Kyle Freeland, being a veteran, steady, a guy you can throw out for opening day that will sell tickets regardless if the team's not good or not. You know, he's from Colorado, he's from Denver. They sell his high school jersey still. So, like, I get it. I get all of the things that he's does a lot with Special Olympics in Colorado. It's just one of those things where you kind of have to be a little ruthless if you want to tear the team down. If you want to say this team has to think differently and choose new ways, you kind of have to be a little ruthless with some of those choices. And if you can clear that contract for free, or, you know, to get anything back at all, you have to take it. I think it's just going to be, I think it's going to get worse. And I think he has been unlucky. He has a FIP that's like a run and a half lower than his ERA. So there is some things to value Kyle Freeland on. You could get something back, but it may be best for both sides to just say, hey, Kyle, you can move on. You know, we'll pay your contract. You're good. But maybe it's best if you found a different team and a different organization. And he probably would do well and succeed. And maybe people would point to that and say, well, you shouldn't have done that. But I just think that there's just a lot around Kyle and the way that he represents a little bit of the past. And if you want to tear that up, you got to tear that up.
And if you open that door, right, and we'll dive into this a little bit more in segment number 2. If you open that door, McMahon, Herman, Senza, I mean, anybody that is really even associated still with the past Rockies, they should you should be at least looking at options for them. And let's take a look into that and talk a little bit about that coming up here in segment number 2 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Wonderful Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. If you are someone that maybe has got to be in kind of close quarters at work, or maybe you want to be a little conscious about the mess you make, you can get the no-shells variety and skip really the funnest part about eating pistachios, which is cracking them open and enjoying them. But you can also see all the great flavors they have for you at wonderfulpistachios.com, because that's where you can head to learn more and get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. 6 grams of protein, if we're being specific. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com for more information. Locked On Rockies back with you here. We're talking with Connor Farrell of Rockies versus Connor, formerly of Purple Row. We were joking around, back covering the team back when it was fun. And man, can you imagine flashing back to the 2018 version of yourself, the 2017 version of yourself, and be like, all right, get this. Nolan Arenado traded. Chris Bryant, Rocky, but he's never going to play. Worst season in MLB history. And I feel like all the color would drain from your face, because you could totally expect it, right?
Yeah. That would be one of those you'd say, that's tough, but I get it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds exactly what we're going to expect here. And you know, I feel bad because some people I've gotten some comments about trying to lighten things up or being too negative, and I just get to a point where it's just kind of like, guys, it literally doesn't get worse than this. We worse than the White Sox last year, worse than the Spiders. I mean, the trajectories and everything. Luckily, and I hope we'll talk a little hope here with Miami. Finally, the Rockies playing a team under 500 here, but they're also playing in Miami, a place that they're cursed at. I wanted to go back to where we were finishing up in the first segment there, moving on from this. And as tough as it would be for Rockies fans to have to move on from their fan favorites, the staples. I think Rockies fans would trade that if at the same time it was because I'm a Dick Monfort's never going to sell the team type of guy, as much as I hate to be that guy, but I think we need to be realistic about his influence and his control in Denver and his family's control. But let's just say he steps back like he says he is. The Rockies do start embracing. If that pairs with moving on from all those players, I think that makes the pill easier to swallow.
Yeah, I think if you can reasonably convince people that the culture has changed, because I think everyone sees that it's not necessarily the guys on the field, it's everything underneath them that brought them to that point. And some of them are not great Major League Baseball players, but a lot of them were just put in the wrong situation. I think you kind of mentioned like Hunter Goodman having to be a rookie, basically leading an offense. And he's not really a guy who's ever led an offense, probably since college. And Zeke Tovar, another one where I think he's a great player. And if he's your fifth or sixth best hitter, you are probably a playoff team, but the Rockies want him to be their best hitter. And that is just something that you can't have. And so I think if you told everyone, hey, you're going to lose Ryan McMahon, you're going to lose Kyle Freeland, you're going to lose that whole era that you've been cheering for, but the culture is going to change. It's not going to be woe is me anymore. We're going to turn it around and try and fight and actually use our advantages that we have. I think you could easily sell that to fans.
Well, especially at this point, right? Because eventually their contracts are going to run out, right? Even if the Rockies hold on to them forever and don't do anything, they aren't going to be involved. I mean, with the Rockies being as bad as they are right now, it's unfortunate to admit that some of our favorites, the guys that got the Rockies to the playoffs in back-to-back times, are not going to help this team down the line. I would love to go see Kyle Freeland pull a John Gray, go be successful, help a team. I mean, I talk to the Rangers podcast. Literally every time we talk, we have to talk about John Gray because I'm such a big fan, because that could happen. And same with Herman. I'm such a big Herman guy. I'm such a big fan of these players. But in this situation, what are they doing? Ryan McMahon, I think, can benefit from a new place. I think it's abundantly clear that if he got out of here, he could get something different. As much as I love the players' loyalty to the team too. It does make me a little bit more proud that these guys care about being Colorado Rockies. It's cool. But at this stage, what does that really bring us? What does that really give us? And I think that's the huge question as we're looking to move on here. And I think the writing part of the thing was having Bud Black return this year, just in general, was just that immediate, we're going to continue. And it's just clear, like, sticking to your guns, sticking to what you guys believe is successful has led to this. And it's just, man, I hope it brings change. But again, it goes back to that. I'm really not confident in that happening with the team.
I think the thing with the Rockies that I've always believed, even back 2014, 2015, when they had their last kind of real bad losing cycle, they're not a team like the Reds or the Pirates where you kind of ask, like, are they even trying to win? They are trying to win. They just have no idea how to do it. And that's the hardest part, is they're signing guys like Ryan McMahon who are solid players. They're doing the right things to keep team fan favorites around. They're not trading everybody away. But that's the flip side of, running a team like Tampa Bay or something like that, is that you run a team like the Rockies where everyone gets to stay for as long as they want, even when they're not useful anymore, or the game has passed them by, like Bud Black or Dick Monfort and Bill Schmidt. Like the team just holds on to everyone and every line of thinking that they've had for so long, and they'd rather win their way than anything else. And that's going to be the hardest thing to overcome.
Yeah, and it's going to require a total overhaul from them too. They're going to have to bring in free agents again. They're going to have to spend money eventually, and the Rockies spend money more than other teams do. But they can't have off seasons like they've had really for 3 in a row. And I'm curious. We talk about Ezekiel Tovar. You mentioned, have you grown more into the Rockies should trade Brenton Doyle, or when I'm looking at Brenton Doyle, the more I'm kind of watching him, I'm like, if we keep those two paired, I think that's the foundation for the next course. Doyle's a little older. Tovar obviously super young. These two guys coming up together, I think they have a couple years of wiggle room to build that the Rockies fans be like, hey, we've moved on from these guys, but remember Doyle, Tovar, we put them on T-shirts, we got bobbleheads, we're already doing this stuff. do you think the Rockies will buy into Brenton Doyle?
If it were me, I would trade Brenton Doyle, and not because of anything that Brenton Doyle is good or bad. I think he's a great center fielder, something the Rockies have needed from pretty much their entire history, and I think that's tough to let go of. But I think the hardest thing there is, would Brenton Doyle be on the next good Rockies team? And if you look at a window of this is the bottom, year one of the rebuild to the next good team, you're 2 or 3 or 4 seasons away. Is Brenton Doyle at 30, 31 gonna be as good? If he loses his legs, that's a lot of his value that goes away, and you don't want to tie yourself to that if you're not going to be a good team until he's already past his prime. If the Rockies were any closer, if they went and won 71 games this year, I'd say absolutely Brenton Doyle, lock him in for 4 or 5 years, get what you can out of him. But you're starting in the basement, and sometimes when you're starting in the basement, you got to choose who's going to be there when you do eventually climb out. And I don't know if Brenton's going to be around or good enough for a good Rockies team.
That's what I'm trying to do. Connor, a little behind the scenes, runs our outside the park baseball league that I'm in, and I'm in way over my head. There's, as Connor can approve, I have all this criticism about real life baseball teams, and yet I have been running a team very poorly. You asked the fake Tampa Bay Rays fans over the past couple of years about this guy, and there's massive problems about that. But it is true. It is that. And that's can this front office actually make those calls? And the answer is no, because it's a weird thing too, or again, where it's like, in the non-fan part of me, I appreciate that the Rockies say, hey, you're our talent. We like you. We want you to be here. Help us win. Be a part of it. Giving out the money to these guys and buying into them. I respect the heck out of the Rockies for doing that. But there is that cutthroat business side that the Rockies really lack at, mixed with, man, it just seems like these guys go out on the field and they just do seem like they're a step behind the competition, no matter if they're one of the best teams in baseball. Like, we've seen the Rockies play a lot of great teams this year, but like, we got the Marlins coming up, and I won't still be surprised if the team strikes out 10 times in every one of these games.
Yeah, you're not in a spot where I think you can make loyalty calls anymore, because your loyalty is to players that are on the worst team in Major League Baseball history at this point. So that's where they have to think. And even great teams, and probably because of great teams having this mindset, you look at the Dodgers, who just cut Chris Taylor, who is a playoff hero in LA, and just had gotten to a point where they could not use him, and they had players in the minors that were coming up. These guys understand the job. Fans understand. You talk to fans when they trade a superstar away in his prime, like Nolan Arenado, and you get a bunch that say, well, it's a business. Well, it's also a business when sometimes you got to get rid of the guys that just aren't going to contribute when your team's good. And I think you kind of have to make those calls sooner than later, because that's when the value is.
Yeah. And I think the biggest question will be, if any, can the Rockies build some value with some players? A Jake Bird, for example. I think teams will certainly be interested in a Jake Bird and some of these other guys. But let's try to brighten things up a little bit, Connor. I want to hear about some stuff that you might have liked from this year, maybe liked from this Met series. We didn't really talk much about that, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then let's relish in the fact that the Rockies are finally playing a team that's a little bit closer to their level here. So if we're talking about the Rockies' odds of finally winning a series and getting to that elusive 10th win, this is the best chance they've had maybe all year. We're going to talk about that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Back at it here with Connor Farrell. Connor, where can they find all your stuff here before we get too far? Where can they stay up to date with what you do?
Yeah, so I moved off of Substack onto Beehive, which is a kind of website newsletter service. You can sign up for free. I believe the link is just rockiesversusconnor.beehive.com. You can also find me on the social media network Blue Sky, and I'm just Rockies versus Connor on there. And I post all my work there. I talk about the games as much as I can, stomach it when they're going on. Really, just try and fight through it. And I try and talk as much as I can about the good things. And, I just found, some relievers in the minors that I like to look at for the Rockies, Connor Van Scoyoc. guys like that I think there are things to like about this Rockies team. So I try and talk about them there.
Well, let's give me a couple. Just give me maybe even, what did you like from the Mets series here? Maybe a couple of things there. We saw the Rockies hit some home runs, which is obviously a good sign. Starting pitching unable to follow up what they did in Chicago, but we did see some life from the offense a bit. And 2 out of 3 games close ain't bad when we're looking for small victories.
Yeah, they're playing respectable baseball, even if they're not winning, and that makes it honestly harder sometimes. You're watching a respectable team lose. I do like what I see out of Carson Palmquist, who had, I think, 7 strikeouts today in just under 5 innings. So I think that is good to see him missing bats and attacking a really good lineup. Zach Agnos gave up a home run to Juan Soto today, but I think he is a very exciting arm out of that bullpen. Him and Seth Halverson, I think there have been, Halverson doesn't have the ERA or the numbers backing him, but they're both live arms that are exciting to watch. The home runs today were unfortunately a couple of veteran guys that you're probably not going to see around forever, and Arcia and Freeman, but it is good to see the ball leave the yard, especially at Citi Field. So I think they're respectable again. And I think there are some fun things about guys like Carson Palmquist, the bullpen, even Tyler Kinley, who's building up some trade value, Jake Bird, like you mentioned. So I like watching the bullpen. And I like it when it's a close game, because I think that even though if they cough up a run and they blow it, they look exciting. They have some good arms out there.
What do you think of the team kind of shifting up? You mentioned, kind of veteran guys that aren't going to play it. But, Amador, it's been a bit of a tough go for him this go around. The Rockies obviously going with him in the wake of the Estrada injury. It is kind of weird how much Bill Schmidt's like, hey, Estrada's back, baby. We are in. We are cooking now. Like, he is super pumped up on the return of Estrada. But of course, they bring in Arcia, and both of these guys making impacts when they take the field, pretty quickly. And obviously, when you look at the back end stuff, you kind of swipe that under the rug and just kind of focus on it. What do you think of the Rockies? Sending Tolia down, making these moves, going with some of these veteran guys. I think some fans would say keep going with the young guys. Where is Ryan Ritter? Why is he not up there?
Yeah, I think I support, I think, Tolia going down. Last year he went down and came back and had a much different outlook. You saw it with Jordan Beck this year. He really struggled in April. They sent him down to Albuquerque to really kind of get his head right. Came back and he's been much, much better, hitting the cover off the ball up until this road trip here. I think it was a smart move with Tolia. I think with Amador, that's one of those where, yes, I would like to see him consistently just starting at second base until he got it and figured it out. But you don't want to kill a kid that's 22, 23, and you kind of rushed him last year, and you didn't really mean to call him up this year because he kind of only got called up because of injuries.
Right.
And so you want to kind of support yourself there and not hurt these young guys that you're really trying to sell the next generation on. So I think, as much as I would say, yeah, chain yourself to the young guys, make those rookies play, you don't want to hurt their confidence, because those guys can go out there and strike out 4 times a game and never return to the prospect that you wanted. So hopefully they can get their heads right in Albuquerque.
And I think that's why not? Like, hey, because if you're both of those guys, let's be real, the door is not closed on a return to the Rockies this year. Like, hey, go build that. The confidence thing is a big thing. I think a lot of people got to remember that. Beck's a prime example. Hopefully Zach Veen, hopefully he's going to, good chance he comes back there and has an impact there. Connor, we are just about out of time here, but before we go, are you feeling optimistic about the Rockies against the Marlins a little bit here? I mean, I don't think the Marlins, I think, have been a surprising team for some, better, but still a team that isn't all that good. If the Rockies can avoid some strikeouts, I think that I still feel confident in them getting to the double-digit wins, at least, if not being in an opportunity to win their first series of the year.
I think stealing a win is probably a possibility. Unfortunately, like you said, the Rockies are cursed in Miami. They do not play well in that ballpark. Even when they were good, they really struggled in Miami. So that makes me worry. I think that the benefit there is it seems like Miami's pitching staff has taken a huge step back and is not missing bats the way that they used to. So the Rockies either get them right or they can get right. So one of these two teams is going to have a good series.
And that's that's really it. I mean, there's been a lot of teams that have been in some slumps or slow and play the Rockies, sweep them away, and launch themselves back into a playoff hunt here, as most team seasons are really getting underway with Memorial Day weekend in the rear view and June upon us. Connor, thank you again. One more time before we go, where can people go to follow what you do and stay up to date with all your work?
Yeah, it's on beehive.rockiesversusconnor.com. And then on the social media app Blue Sky, I am Rockies versus Connor.
And you can, of course, find Locked On Rockies on your favorite streaming services and the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section. And I'm looking forward to our league roasting me, being like, this guy's saying all this stuff when he's been a bottom dweller for how long and just paid. I literally did the Nolan Arenado trade in our league. I signed Wander Franco to an extension, and then I traded him away. It's basically how it all went for us there. But, Connor, thank you so much for the time today, folks. We'll be talking Rockies all throughout the week right here on Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, check out all the great stuff on the Locked On MLB network, including Locked On MLB. And if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Avalanche, Nuggets, and Buffs, all free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. Until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.